Good afternoon. It's Thursday, September 29th. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Shimon Peres made his last journey from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem early this morning. His casket, accompanied by a Knesset honor guard, left its Refim army base in a security convoy to the capital, with police stopping traffic on Highway 1 to allow the convoy through. The casket was placed outside the Knesset, allowing the country's politicians and dignitaries to pay their respect to the statesman and lay wreaths. Until 9 o'clock tonight, members of the public will be able to file past the coffin and bid farewell to the country's 9th president. IBA's political reporter Kalev Ben-David was at the Knesset Plaza earlier and spoke with members of the public and politicians there, paying their respect.
They came from all over Israel and from abroad as well, young and old, famous and ordinary, to pay their last respects to Shimon Peres, filing past his flag-draped coffin outside the Knesset, where he served the public for nearly half a century. Not all of those in attendance had admired Peres so warmly throughout his career or agreed with every stand he had taken, but on this day, those differences were forgotten. Now, not everybody agreed with all his politics. Did you agree with all his politics?
Partly, but I don't see him as a politician anymore. In the last 10 years, he's been president for 7 years, and he did so much things that were unpolitical, and I think it overcome everything about politics.
Despite his advanced age, Peres had a special affinity for the young, and many in the crowd of mourners were young people who, like 17-year-old Ido Mordechai, had in recent years come to admire and love the figure who had become their only and last living link to Israel's founding fathers.
It's amazing how all the time he was using technology, and one day before he got into the hospital, he actually uploaded a video to Facebook, like, my grandma don't know how to do it, and he's 90 years old man just inspiring all the teenagers in Israel, and I think it's incredible, the connection of the generations.
The size and diversity of the crowd, according to Zionist Union Knesset member Yossi Yona, was a tribute to the change in public attitude toward Peres in recent years.
In his later years, first when he became a president of the State of Israel, he began to gain a lot of support from the Israeli society. After all, he was one associated with the founding leaders of our country, and he was a dominant figure in all junctions that shaping and forming the state of Israel. And I think that people at the time already wanted to pay him a tribute to his a very significant and crucial role in the process leading to how to put it, the flowering of our country, to the building of our country. And especially in his last years, the support and the love and the like of Israeli society grew immensely.
Another Zionist Union Knesset member, Nachman Shai, said that while Peres would have appreciated the tribute paid him, he would have been impatient to move on to the next thing. Well, what would he say if he could see the outpouring both from Israelis here today and what tomorrow?
I would say don't spend too much time on that. There's no reason. You have a very important job to do. So let's return to our desk and try to see what's the next challenge.
Once a divisive figure in life, Shimon Peres has shown that he is able to unify Israelis in his passing as people from all walks of life in all parts of the country come to the Knesset to pay their last respects to the last of Israel's founding fathers. From the Knesset, this is Kalev Ben-David for IBA News.
Former U.S. President Bill Clinton was the first of a long and respected list of world leaders and dignitaries arriving in the country to attend their funeral. Clinton landed at the Ben Gurion airport this morning in a private plane belonging to Israeli-American billionaire Chaim Saban, a close friend of the Clinton family and a known financial supporter of the Clinton Foundation. The former U.S. president arrived without his wife, Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton, who was originally said to be joining him but was obliged to stay due to a tight campaign schedule. Bill Clinton traveled straight to the Knesset to pay his respects at Peres's casket. Following some initial ambiguity from the White House, it has been officially confirmed that U.S. President Barack Obama will attend the funeral tomorrow. The American president's Air Force One plane is scheduled to land at Ben Gurion early Friday morning. Obama, who is heading a delegation of over a dozen American diplomats, including Secretary of State John Kerry, will remain in the country for several hours and will then head back to Washington immediately after the funeral. Yesterday, Obama instructed that all U.S. flags at the White House and all federal buildings across the country be flown at half-mast in honor of the late former Israeli president. The order also applies to U.S. embassies, military posts, Navy stations, and naval vessels across the world. The Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway was and will be intermittently closed to traffic to facilitate the arrival of foreign dignitaries. Amid heightened, unprecedented security presence, thousands of police were deployed in and around Jerusalem to secure the funeral of Shimon Peres. Security forces erected roadblocks across the capital and Highway 1. The Shin Bet security agency is also prepared to protect over 60 world leaders, including 20 presidents, 15 foreign ministers, and 5 heads of state. Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss the unprecedented security preparations is National Police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld. Mickey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So what's the situation like right now? What's going on?
At the moment, the Israeli National Police and its different units have been deployed in and around Jerusalem. We're focusing, of course, around the Knesset area where there are hundreds of people that have been visiting throughout the day. There's been thousands of people. And our units, of course, are making sure that everyone can come according to the schedule in the different areas without any major incidents whatsoever. But at the same time, we're carrying out general security measures in and around Jerusalem, at the entrances, at central bus stations, train stations, the light railway as well, in order to make sure there are no major issues that could take place.
Now, this is a completely unprecedented event, security-wise. How complex was this operation to put together?
Well, this is one of the largest police operations that have taken place, in fact, for years. But the Israeli police are fully prepared, both with its different units, both with preparations, both the number of officers that are in and around the different areas. We're talking about a 2-day operation with more than 8,000 police officers involved. We're talking about technology that is being used, Israeli police helicopters that are involved in the operation, watching up and above from what is going on the ground. At the same time, we're coordinating, of course, the different convoys of the representatives that have come in from overseas, especially to respect and spend their last moments with of course, Shimon Peres. And as far as we're concerned, that will take place tomorrow morning. The main focus and emphasis will be tomorrow morning, the funeral and the preparations before.
So we are also before the New Year's, the Rosh Hashanah holidays. How long will these security preparations be in effect?
Well, this specific security operation will continue until Friday afternoon. Then we'll have the weekend where our Israeli police units will be brought in from the different parts of the country. Sunday morning, which is the New Year Jewish holiday, which begins for the next 2 days. There are full security arrangements that are made specifically for that. That's a separate operation which is planned ahead of time. But what I can tell you on the ground in terms of the different units that are in the different areas and according to the plans that are happening, everything is going exactly the way it should be until now. But of course, we're not taking any chances whatsoever, and our units can respond in any way whatsoever to any types of scenarios. We're taking things surely and steadily as they take place.
We talk about 8,000 security forces being deployed, I assume that police and border police. Now, does that expose the rest of the public to any kind of terrorist attack because everyone will be focused on Jerusalem?
Absolutely not. The Israeli police are working specifically on this security operation, the scale and the size. At the same time, there's regular security plans that are taking place, security measures that are being implemented, not just in Jerusalem, but also across the different parts of the country. We're taking into consideration Ben Gurion Airport, the international airport, where there are many flights and extra flights that are coming in as well. We're talking about road safety and different units that are patrolling the roads as well. Things are entirely under control as far as we're concerned. But of course, in these types of situations, we have to make sure that, number one, heightened security continues and regular police operations at the same time.
Well, we hope it all goes smoothly. National Police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Dozens of heads of state and world leaders are at this hour making their way to Israel. Among the respected list are Britain's Prince Charles, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and French President François Hollande, Beatrix, the Queen Mother of the Netherlands, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Whether by limousine or helicopter, the high-level dignitaries will head straight to the capital, where they will stay ahead of the funeral. The Ben Gurion Airport has designated a special sterile and secured area for the landing of the visiting planes, a plan which began immediately after Peres was evacuated to hospital 2 weeks ago. A special podium has been set up at the tarmac, enabling international figures to deliver their message. Earlier today, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who was born the same year as Peres, arrived in the country.
As a person, he was a remarkable character. He was creative, innovative, generous-minded, the very finest of the Jewish spirit. And even in his 90s, I used to meet him, and he was always full of new ideas, new plans, new thoughts for the future. We will not really see the like of him again.
Even though he recognized what a painful and long process it might be, so he will be deeply missed as somebody who acted as sort of a conscience to both Arabs and Jews in the region.
Ahead of his departure to Israel, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry reflected on the life of the late Shimon Peres and his contribution to the pursuit of peace in the Middle East.
Dedicated his life to the cause of an Israel that would be safe and secure, democratic and free, and the homeland of the Jewish people. And he never lost that vision. And so many times when I was traveling over there so frequently to meet with the Prime Minister, he would express a frustration, frankly, with the pace and with the lack of the seizure of opportunities. But he always felt restrained and necessarily respectful of the incumbent Prime Minister, having been a Prime Minister himself. So he never inserted himself inappropriately in the dialogue. But I can tell you, he was impatient for peace for his country and impatient for the lost, grabbed opportunities that were passing by.
While Shimon Peres has been the subject of many warm obituaries in the Western press, the coverage was less so in the Arab world. Meanwhile, this afternoon it was announced that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will attend the funeral after receiving permission from the Israeli government to enter Jerusalem. Reports in Egyptian media said that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi conveyed his condolences but will not attend the funeral. However, unconfirmed reports say that he will send his foreign minister. So far, Jordan's King Abdallah has yet to comment on the former president's death. Despite Peres' decade-long efforts to reach out to the Arab world, he has been mainly remembered as a war criminal and key contributor to the settlement project. Saudi Arabia's Sabak newspaper titled its obituary, "President of Israeli Colonialism, Peres Dies." Akhbar 24, another Saudi site, said Peres' name has always been linked to the settler colonialism and forced displacement of Palestinians from the West Bank. This morning, the Foreign Minister of Bahrain, Khalid al-Khalafi, tweeted, "Rest in peace, Shimon Peres, a man of war and a man of the still elusive peace in the Middle East." Well, joining me now in the studio is Amotz Asael, a senior columnist for the Jerusalem Post. Amotz, welcome.
How are you?
So we're seeing an impressive list of visitors, of people coming to, dignitaries coming to the funeral, prime ministers, kings, the leaders of the countries. And what made Shimon Peres so admired to the fact that the American government is lowering its flags to half-mast?
Well, I think there are several groups among the many dignitaries coming here. The first that begs a comment is what for now seems the conspicuously absent Arab world's leaders. And Abu Mazen's exception in this regard is noteworthy. It takes some courage on his part to make this move, and it should be seen when we actually see him here tomorrow as the 1/4 of the cup that is full, following the Oslo Accords, where Peres, of course, played first violin, but the rest of the Arab world's leaders are absent, and that, I think, reflects the great tragedy of the Arab world, which is failing to arrive, not because of what did or did not happen with Peres' peace vision, but what did not happen in terms of his new Middle East vision. Mm-hmm. They have to stay at home because leaving their capitals is risky for them completely, regardless of Israel. That's the Arabs. The Western leaders are going to parade here tomorrow. I think that what they share in terms of Shimon Peres is a deep admiration for a statesman that had a clear vision of the future that most of them sadly lack in their own situations. He had vision and he had resolve, and this is something that is glaringly missing from today's international system. Finally, there are the Eastern Europeans or Central European leaders who are going to be, it seems, quite disproportionately present here in the positive sense, I mean. And I think that among them, among all these post-communist Democrats, there is an admiration for what Peres represented, namely Israel's resolve and efficiency in standing up to the Soviet Union in its time, which was their archenemy. And I think that they admire that, and this is how they're going to express it.
Well, let's look at the Israeli public display of their response to his death. We seem to have a genuinely and a surprisingly warm sort of reception or memory of the observant community in Israel over Shimon Peres. Even Naftali Bennett, who was his political rival, had warm words for Peres. Why is that?
I think that one has to understand right now the big difference in the attitude towards religious Israel between Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin never really was curious to understand the faith with which he was unfamiliar. Shimon Peres was, and the story about him is that he even, just for the sake of curiosity, he used to regularly study Mishnah with Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. He was curious about the Jewish heritage with which he had only minimal familiarity. Politically speaking, he was always careful to not provoke religious Israel, whether the ultra-Orthodox or the modern Orthodox or even the Messianic. He was on good terms with them, and he had deep respect for what drove them, even when he was in deep disagreement with them.
But to what extent is Shimon Peres the last giant?
I think that, first of all, technically speaking, the very last few people who still are with us were in their 90s. That took part in the events of Israel's establishment, or the ones that shortly afterwards followed that. Unlike Shimon Peres, none of them could claim to have played a role in each and every one of Israel's formative events and also the subsequent events. He was an actor, even in the War of Independence, as a logistical person in the embryonic IDF, and then he was a major figure in the 1956 war. He was the one who created the big arms deal with France, without which that war would not have been won, or the 6 Days War also. That too was won mainly, or predominantly, with the French-made Mirage fighter planes, and then he was central in all the subsequent events as well. That is why he's considered now the last of our Mohicans, and I think that this is why the Israeli public right now shares a sense of orphanhood with Shimon Peres' departure.
He did live to the ripe age of 93 years old, yes.
Yes, he did, and the happy part of his very stormy biography is that after decades of having been deeply controversial and frequently reviled, he really spent his last years popular and universally loved.
Amotz Asael, thanks so much for joining IBA News.
Thank you, Ari.
A cascade of jets ferrying in the world leaders and dignitaries to their funeral coincides with one of the heaviest days at Ben Gurion Airport, causing major congestion today and tomorrow. In the coming days, some 160,000 passengers are expected to fly out of the airport, including some 40,000 going to Uman in the Ukraine as part of a mass Rosh Hashanah pilgrimage at the grave of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Amid all this, over 60 private planes have already confirmed their arrival, including Air Force One bringing President Obama and 2 aircraft bringing in America's Jewish leadership. Dozens of additional airport workers have been called up to help alleviate the pressure. Shimon Peres lived much of his life in Tel Aviv, having moved there when he first made Aliyah in 1934. In 2009, the Peres Center for Peace found a home on the Jaffa seafront, and it was in Tel Aviv yesterday that Peres passed away. In honor of the statesman, the Tel Aviv municipality building projected the flag of Israel and messages of peace in Hebrew and English, as well as the former president's name on its facade. In finance, the stock exchange is down today and the shekel is mixed. Here are the numbers. Turning to the weather, and the forecast is for more pleasant skies and no change in temperatures. Here are the expected highs and lows at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. That's all for today. We would like to remind our viewers that over the holidays, beginning on Sunday, we will be broadcasting special holiday bulletins at our usual time of 4 o'clock. Please tune in. We leave you now with David Deor singing Avinu Malkeinu, which he will perform tomorrow at Shimon Peres' funeral at the late statesman's explicit request.
Wenn ihr Schwinge